Hey, this is Notser, and today's video we're discussing balance. Wargaming at the Anaheim Let's Battle Tour in California this weekend had a bunch of information about future plans, and I want to discuss them. The game in the background is myself in the Tier 7 Premium Soviet Destroyer, Leningrad. We're using Alexander Ovechkin, and he has Enhanced Expert Marksman and Survivability Expert. So I tried to find a ship that it fit the best on. And I think the premium Soviet DDs, they're the best ships because they never received that turret traverse buff that all the other Soviets received in their DD line. It covers up a weakness of the premiums, for sure. Is it the only option? No. Is it going to be my final option? Honestly, I don't know that either. It's probably not going to be my final option because I just don't play these that often. I might just stick them in my gearing. So I have that blue tracer, because that's all I care about. Now, balance changes. So the first one, Battleship Ap versus Destroyers. This is the one that so many people are, disappointed in. The chain's going in. They were happy with what was tested. So for anyone who's not familiar with it, your Battleship Ap, if your gun is larger or equal to 280 millimeters, will be capped to 10% of the AP shell damage when making contact with an enemy DD. Now, the two destroyers that are sort of immune to this effect, the Khabarovsk and Harugumo, those two will still take full AP damage. And honestly, I don't really think the community's going to change the way they play. I think they'll continuously load AP, or they'll load HE, and they'll just fire it. I mean, how many Royal Navy battleships, the Warspite, the Nelson, do you see loading high explosive all the time, even though they have one of the largest gun calibers tier for tier in the game? People just like to be lazy when it comes to these sorts of things. So I just expect that they will continuously keep that AP loaded. It is the superior ammo when firing against a cruiser, a battleship, Kaba, Harugumo. Just keep it there. Just keep the fire up. 2 salvos back to back rather than considering what ammo to load is probably better. The next change that will be going in 7.11 is the Japanese cruiser, so the improved Sigma, the faster turret traverse for the Miyoko, the improved rate of fire for the Ibuki, the Rune and Hindenburg extra heal charge. All that's going in 7.11. Now and the Japanese destroyer, Alpha, the high explosive shell getting buffed. All of those changes 7.11, which is super exciting. I'm ready to go on all of those. I have a Rune and Hindenburg plan. Since I'm getting so many heal charges, the same as a battleship, it's very rare that me as a cruiser gets to go the full duration of my health to use all 5 charges. So I'm thinking maybe the German commanders with the improved Jack of all trades, they might work very well for the Rune and Hindenburg after this change. I'm working on my commander to see if that's the case, but I'm really enjoying it. The idea that they're going to be just more tanky. I love that. The damage penetration change, the secondary modules, the Torpedo Bulge, this will not be coming in 7.11. But it is still being tested, the idea. I've heard through the grapevine that this is in direct counter to the torpedo making contact with damage-saturated bow and sterns. This is probably the one area of the game where it is a massive change. So if anyone's not familiar, if your bow and stern, if it gets fully saturated, it basically takes no damage. And if you have 2 torpedoes, for instance, landing on the bow back to back, a lot of times in the game, that first torpedo will do full damage. That second torpedo, depending on the target, it might do half damage or it might do no damage. That doesn't feel very good to do no damage in that situation. So I've heard that Wargaming still intends to implement some change like this to directly address how a torpedo is fully absorbed on those sections of the ship. I just don't know how they're going to do it. Secondary gun efficiency. All AP secondary guns will be switched to high explosive in 7.11. There are more changes being designed, and their goal is to make secondary builds equal in power to everything else. They don't want it to be more powerful. They don't want it to be less powerful. They want it to be a viable option for players. And, you know, as a secondary fiend, I am so jacked up for this. This is a great change to keep me invested in the Battleship play, because I feel like I have to creep away from secondaries with my French. The only ones I can have it is my Germans, because they have that extra armor, but the French are just covered in paper. They can't afford to take all the light cruiser damage, so I'm really excited for what this might bring. I would love to try and figure out more information. Maybe I could find a way to get a exclusive interview to talk about secondaries and what they want to do. Just vague terms. Maybe they'll be interested in talking about that. That might be cool. Radar changes. Their goal is to adjust the meta. They do not want to nerf it into the ground. They want it to be a viable alternative strategy. It's not really that way in certain situations right now. It's pretty much the best strategy and the only strategy. They've tried the line of sight check, so radar would not see through islands. They have tried a dispersion penalty. Probably whenever radar is used, the target is not as seen as a equal target as a open water envisioned target. Maybe there would just be more dispersion penalty, similar to that concealment module or the Minotaur's legendary, that sort of dispersion in the camouflage. Yeah, so maybe there would have been some passive modifier that would exist. They tested both of these internally, and they were spectacular in their failure. So they're not a viable alternative for this. They have to figure out something else. The new work in progress is a delayed spotting mechanic for your teammates. And I kind of like that idea. If the radaree can see the target for the full duration, and all his teammates can obviously see the area that the enemy is, it would appear as if it's a cyclone, but you're out of range on the cyclone. And then maybe 5, 10, 15 seconds later, they actually come into vision. I think that's a fair compromise to keep radar viable, but not make it like everyone focus fire, everyone kill the target in like 3 seconds, right? That feels really bad. But hey, that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to focus fire a target. You're doing everything you should do. It's just the game mechanics don't really feel good enough to have that continuously exist. So I'm glad they're looking to try and improve that. Despite literally everything I just said before this, radar, cruisers, destroyers, buffing all that stuff, they love battleships, and they're going to be buffing some battleship lines. So the American battleship line from tier 3 to tier 9 will receive a buff. I don't know why the Iowa and the North Carolina receive a buff. Maybe it's a subtle buff that we will barely notice, but it'll just unify the design. I have no idea. Myogi, Izumo, Friedrich der Grosse, those 3 ships will also receive an improvement. Confirmed improvement coming. I'm really happy because they need it. They really desperately need it. Wargaming intends to change the flood mechanic. They want to rework it to be more deep, similar to the fire. You have sections. Consider how many sections can you allow to burn before you can put the fire out. For aircraft carriers, it prevents your aircraft from being launched. Maybe flooding provides section damage, and you have to decide which you want to use damage control on and which you don't. Maybe it causes the ship to perform, maybe it starts listing, or the guns are less accurate, or there's many different things that you can consider for flooding. They just want to add more depth. And I think they need more depth, especially with submarines. Submarines, they're successful. The operation is a success. Yes, it's super easy. They're going to make one that's harder. And then maybe they're going to implement some co-op, maybe some PvP, and then we're going to go from there. And they rely heavily on the flood mechanic. It needs to be deep. And I want it to be deep because flooding right now just feels like either you're really bad and you use damage control when there's clearly a risk of flood, or you're really good and you get lucky and there's, you have damage control for the flood. But if you allow a flood to stick, well, you're dead. So yeah, they need to change that. Cruiser Citadel survivability going up. They want to encourage more maneuvering. They don't want cruisers to be as vulnerable. That's a great change. I love it. Heavy cruisers versus light cruisers. So this is a weird topic. Light cruisers are better than heavy cruisers at high explosive. They just are. They are really good compared to heavy cruisers. And they don't like that relationship. They're going to change it. they're going to make it to where the high explosive is more distinguishable. Light cruisers will fail to penetrate equal tier battleships and higher tier cruisers more often, whereas heavy cruisers will not shatter against either of those targets and do full damage. So that's an interesting mechanical change, but one that I like. And then finally, IFHE. They want to make it less mandatory and have more trade-offs. Overall, I think all this is really exciting. Tell me what you think in the comments. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you next time.